Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Whale Nerds podcast. This is episode 147. My name is Caitlin, and we have a special guest on this week named Kayah. Kayah George is a Coast Salish matriarch in training and a climate leader. She's the great-granddaughter of the celebrated chief Dan George and the granddaughter and niece of Tsleil-Waututh matriarchs Amy George and Charlene Alec, respectively, and a daughter of the Tulalip matriarch Deborah Parker. Kayah is working to study the effects of noise, light, and other types of pollution on orcas and other sea life. And she and members of her family have been featured within the last year by Patagonia and by Canadian media for their activism in the environmental issues that face their home waters in British Columbia and the wildlife that they share space with, especially the endangered southern resident killer whale. So welcome, Kayah. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm very excited to chat with you after those amazing articles that came out in Patagonia and in the Globe and Mail. Those were super cool. And Danny's photos were just absolutely beautiful of you and your family. So that was really awesome.
Sweet. Thank you. Thank you.
So maybe we should start with a little bit of context about like where you live and kind of what started all of the coverage about the Tsleil-Waututh people and the Trans Mountain Pipeline story in the waters around British Columbia.
Yeah, let's go back to the beginning. When I was born, no, I'm just kidding. We'll start.
We can go that far.
We'll start halfway there. When the Trans Mountain fight started. Well, I'll start a bit about me. Yeah, like you said, my name's Kayah George. I am based in Vancouver, BC, and actually Burnaby, North Burnaby. I go to Simon Fraser University and I study linguistics and psychology, and also doing a research internship for Clear Seas Center for Responsible Marine Shipping, and that's where I'm like diving deeper into like orcas and their environment. But yeah, how the fight started with the against the Trans Mountain Pipeline. I was about 12 years old when my dad came to me and my brother, and he said, you know, they're trying to build a pipeline through many people's territory, and it'll end in ours, and it'll increase tanker traffic, oil, and carry large, massive amounts of oil through our most sacred, holy place in the world, which is the Burrard Inlet. We call it the Tsleil-Waututh Inlet, and we see that inlet as our oldest grandmother. And Tsleil-Waututh directly translates to people of the inlet, so it's very much a big part of our identity as people. So my dad said, you know, it said it'll bring economic opportunity, it'll bring so many good things. He was like, but we know a lot better than that. And so not only are we gonna say no to it, but we're gonna do everything in our power to stop it and protect the water. And so me and my brother were like, yeah, my dad, he was like, it's gonna get a lot busier around here, and it's a big thing. I'm gonna be going up against like a multi-billion-dollar industry, the energy, you know, a huge energy company, you know, and governments, and just it's a big fight for just a small family from a small nation. And so at that time, many people didn't know about the Trans Mountain because it was just getting started. And when we first started going to rallies, it would just be like us and like 20 people, and like it was very small. And it started to grow every year because for the most part, Burnaby residents and like Vancouver residents and many people live around here. We live here for the nature. We live here for the beauty and for everything. And just, I feel like most people here have this like really inherent like sense of like belonging and of like this need to preserve nature. And just because it's so part of our identity as like a city. And so yeah, it started growing every year. And Tsleil-Waututh, the nation, when my dad went forward to the nation about the Trans Mountain Pipeline, it was 100% consensus no. Everybody was like, no, this is not a good idea. This is not in the best interest of our nation and our allies and neighbors who live around us. And it's definitely not in the best interest of our future generations and of the animals and of our environment who can't come to the table and have a vote. So for all of their needs too, we have to step forward and speak up for them. And so they said no, and then they created like a 1,200 page assessment and all the reasons why they said no, and including it includes cultural knowledge, and it includes like a lot of our histories and a lot of our creation stories, and it also has a lot of information from like they partnered with economists, with environmentalists, with many different like marine biologists and anthropologists, a very, very like in-depth like look at why this pipeline shouldn't go through. And there's also a summarized version in case people don't want to. I could give you a link in case people don't want to read 1,200 pages.
Yeah.
And of like very dense, some part of it really dense, or part of it like it's a lot of information. So there's a summarized version that I always suggest people look at and read. And yeah, since then we've been advocating really hard, and the whole city just lit up for the protection of the inlet. And they like, I think it was like something like 87%. I don't know, I can't, it's been a long time, that
Yeah.
number. I was a teenager when, or the majority of Burnaby residents backed Tsleil-Waututh Nation in fighting against the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and an overwhelming majority of Vancouver residents as well. And so there was just daily protests, daily actions. And on Burnaby Mountain, I think it was 2018, they erected a watch house, which is a traditional, like, it's like, it looks like a small long house where my ancestors would construct one to look at enemies and incoming, and keep an eye on them. And so we put it right near the terminal, the oil terminal. So just to keep an eye, and with no city permits, because why would we need one? It's our territory,
Yeah.
like it's unceded territory. There was never an agreement or never a treaty made. So it is all ours according to our law. And that still, the watch house still stands there. But around that time we had like a march with, I think, like 10,000 plus people marched
Wow.
through the streets and came and ended at the watch house. And or did it start again? I was a teenager. It's crazy. I'm looking
Yeah.
back on all the years. I grew up in this movement since I was 12 years old. But and there was so much backlash, there was so much opposition from Tsleil-Waututh and all of our allies, that Kinder Morgan, the energy company that once owned the pipeline, dropped it. It was a massive victory for us.
Yeah.
Like,
That's awesome.
people kept calling it a David and Goliath fight. That's such a small nation of just over 800 people, and just a small family from that, and just a few people started this like huge movement against, like, again, a huge energy company. And so it was a huge victory for us. We were celebrating, but that was like very short lived, because the Canadian government ended up purchasing the pipeline.
Mm.
And so it went from Kinder Morgan's pipeline to Trudeau's pipeline. And that's where we're at now. We've been fighting it ever since. And they recently finished, which is terrible. And they plan on making it operational pretty soon. And again, it's a constant battle, it's a constant fight, but we're diligent, and that kind of led me, as I was doing a lot of environmental work. My dad likes to mention I've spoken at United Nations a few times, and I've traveled like globally to speak on a lot of the issues that we're facing, and also stand in solidarity with other Indigenous peoples and environmental groups standing up for the earth and for the water. I felt like I was saying a lot of the same thing when people would ask, why would such a small nation, why would your family, why did you fight so hard for this body of water? And I say, because it's everything to us. And it's the way we see it is, that's our oldest grandmother. As our creation story goes, we come from that water, and we love her the same way we'd love a grandmother. And I kept saying that. And I was also, at the time, I was like, what was I doing? I was a divestment campaigner for Indigenous climate action, and which was really great. It was a really, really insightful, like, it was really, I don't know, it was really good work, but it just wasn't landing. Those numbers a lot of the time weren't landing with people, like the general public. I'm like, this much money is going into here, and it represents this. And to an extent, like, people were understanding. And during that time, Chubb ended up divesting, Chubb Limited, which was one of the biggest investors in like in the pipeline, ended up divesting in that time. So that was also a big win. But as I was saying, a lot of the general public, it wasn't landing. And so instead of repeating myself the whole time, like, and going to all these different rallies, I thought instead of telling people, I'd show them what this means, and I'd show them what it means to have that deep reciprocal relationship with the water. And around that time too, I came across the quote that changed my life, by Tony Cade Bambara. It's, as it goes, it's the artist's job to make the revolution irresistible. And
Yeah.
that's when I started I decided to start filmmaking. And I ended up making a film that's currently doing its festival run with a very dear friend of mine who's been a family friend for many years, and a friend of my dad's for many years, Jamie Lee Giannopoulos. We made a film called Our Grandmother the Inlet, and it highlights the connection, that sacred connection that I have. And through that process, I also it's hard being on the front line. I ended up doing a lot of healing through the process of making that film, and it's been very cathartic. And since then, I haven't really went back. I've always been deeply invested in just getting deeper into filmmaking and directing and acting, and I fell in love with it. And so that sort of led my journey to even now. Like I said, our grandmother the Inlet, it just played in New Zealand. I was just in New Zealand 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks. I losing track.
It's all a blur.
Yeah, and then we ended up winning the Trickster Award at Skoden Indigenous Film Festival here in Vancouver. We premiered last September at Vancouver International Film Festival, where we got honorable mention for Best Canadian Short, and I was really hyped. I was excited about that.
Yeah.
So it's been traveling quite a bit, and it's making the impact I've hoped it would, and it's simultaneously been very cathartic and very healing, as I've written so much into that. And so yeah, now I'm traveling with the film and showing it everywhere I can, and then I'm continuing, and that leads me to my next few projects. So I'm currently, as I mentioned, doing a research internship for Clear Seas Center for Responsible Marine Shipping. And what I'm focusing on is the marine biodiversity in the inlet, and as with obviously like a very big focus on orcas and my love of them. And that kind of started from a project we did with Patagonia, I think 2 years ago now. And a lot of that, we just started to look at the similarities orcas have, the matriarchy of orcas have with the matriarchy of Coast Salish peoples. And then from there, Globe and Mail got very interested, and we did an article with Globe and Mail. And then from there, we made a pitch to National Geographic, and now I'll be filming a short doc series in July with National Geographic. And that was a really exciting process. But before then, sorry, I just get very excited.
No, it's cool. I love it. I love it. No, this is all this momentum. It keeps going. It's great. So
yeah, it reminds me of one thing and then another, and then I'm like, okay. And
cool.
Yeah, I'm currently doing with my internship, I'm making a video, and I'm doing some interviews with a couple scientists. One is my cousin from Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and then a person from Taryn, what's her last name, who's studying at UBC, and she's studying orca behavior, and then a couple knowledge keepers and elders who carry creation stories and carry stories about like our orca relatives. And so I'll be looking with the internship, just looking at the relationship orcas have had with canoes, and how we have a long-standing history of them coming to canoes and with around canoes. And that continues today when we still do our canoe journeys and canoe races. It's not uncommon for orcas to kind of breach near canoes. That happened to my mom when she was paddling in the 90s. She or it was early 2000s, and she almost like got an orca in the eye because it came up so close to her canoe. And so I just thought it was so fascinating. Like my journey has kind of started with noise pollution, and it's kind of led me towards like just learning about their interactions with marine vessels and how that differs from like speedboats and tankers and like more Western marine vessels versus like indigenous marine vessels. And that's when I learned about we have a lot of stories where my peoples and a lot of Coast Salish peoples would go whaling and they would save the tongue for the orcas.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like
Yep.
many stories and many like cultural stories. And now we know that orcas, that's what they eat is whale tongue. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's like well documented. And so I was like, that makes a lot of sense. They have an association and at first I was like, this might seem far-fetched. And I was like, yeah, I think my theory was that because orcas, the grandmothers passed down stories and passed down knowledge and passed down like ways of survival to the young. Like they probably passed down stories around canoes. And Southern residents have a language of around like 1,000, 1,000 words. It's really complex compared to transient orcas because they have more capacity, as you probably know all this, more capacity and more ability to speak and communicate with each other because their prey isn't they eat salmon.
Right.
So and they because of that capacity to like speak to each other more, I have this theory that they, as a lot of my peoples have orca songs, I'm like, they probably have a human that could see those people's song too. They probably
Yeah.
have like many stories about us that go back generations the same way. And even with this disruption, you see with a lot of the parallels in matriarchy and the grandmothers teaching the young, much like in my people and how my people and our family structures go. And they also have songs. Each member has they have songs that they pass down too, like orcas and like my people as well. They've also experienced this like colonial trauma
Yeah.
and displacement and a lot of their young being taken away like ours and a lot of like and that's been a huge disruptor in their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you see what's come from that is resistance and civil disobedience and standing up. You see that in a lot of Coast Salish peoples, like making a stand, making a statement in a lot of our culture and our speaking. And I see that with orcas too. They're some might be say it's like they're exhibiting really strange behavior with like even the yachts in Portugal, like they're very aware. People, a lot of people are like, oh, they're trying to hurt people. I'm like, no, they're very aware they're not hurting
Yeah.
anybody. Like
Yeah.
their capacity and their what's it called? They could see on the boats how many people are
Yeah.
on there, and they know they're not hurting people. They have
Yeah.
what's it called? They're clicking.
Their
Anyway,
echolocation.
yeah, their
Yeah.
echolocation. They have an awareness of that
Yeah.
these people are being hurt. They're making a stand, and there isn't really they don't hurt human beings. That's not
Right.
something that
Right.
happens. And so I believe that they're making a stand. They're making a statement. You hurt one of us, and this is what we're gonna do. And also when you've seen that orca mother carrying its calf
Mm-hmm.
that passed for weeks, um, that's also making a stand. It's like, look at what's happening, look at what you did, look at what happened to my baby.
Yeah.
And so I believe that's them, having, and it's almost like this parallel as you see like young indigenous people, young Coast Salish people standing up. You see this parallel of like young orcas, like I think standing up. And so I was like, this might be a stretch, but it's been received really well. Like I said, the parallels and exploring the parallels. It was ended up getting picked up by National Geographic. They were very interested. And so, and again, it's a theory, but I really do believe we've had this spiritual connection to orcas for so long, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg in understanding their behavior and their capacity to
Mm-hmm.
pass down stories and their capacity for culture and like spiritual connection and everything. We're just beginning to understand that. And I mean,
Yeah.
Western knowledge and Western science,
Yeah.
but I think indigenous peoples and stories, we've known that for a very long time. We call them, I was just speaking with an uncle and he was like, those are people under the sea.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we believe. They're
Yeah.
people, the way they think, the way they do things, the way they live with each other. That's a tribe, that's a nation that lives under the ocean. And that's how we've always looked at them. We've never seen them as like dumb animals. We've always known that
Yeah.
they're not killing machines either. They love each other and they exist and they have beauty and songs and traditions around them. And so I don't know. It's really exciting stuff.
Yeah,
And
I'm excited to see where you go with the Nat Geo stuff next. That's gonna be really cool.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so you're gonna film, is the goal to try and get Southern Residents filmed this summer while you're working on the series, or do you have like some other things you're gonna do as well?
Oh yeah. I will. It's because of a lot of restrictions, and there rightfully should be a lot of restrictions. It's difficult to get footage of Southern residents,
Yeah.
and last time for even though we talked a lot about Southern residents in the past two articles with Patagonia and Globe and Mail,
Mm-hmm.
the pictures we got were actually of two transient brother
Mm-hmm.
orcas, and so that's okay as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
because of again because of all of the restrictions around them. It's like
Yeah.
it would be ideal, of course, to get video, but we're not gonna press it
Yeah.
out of respect and of their safety and everything. We're not gonna
Mm-hmm.
push too hard on getting footage specifically of them. But yeah, that's something we're definitely gonna do. We're going out on the water. We have the day scheduled. We have everything ready for that.
Cool.
And even next month as well, when I do my video for my internship, which is sort of like it's awesome because it's like leading up to my doc series with Nat Geo, and with my internship I'll be going out on the water as well. And again, you can't guarantee it,
Right.
but it's definitely worth a shot. They're so beautiful, and they're not too far from here either. And there's been like more reported sightings even recently of orcas in the inlet, which is surprising because the water is pretty polluted. There's a lot of boats, a lot of noise
Mm-hmm.
pollution, a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely the inner waters of British Columbia and Washington State, and even up into Alaska. A lot of those waterways are very busy,
Oh
between
yeah,
moving logs around, people going out in their own boats, commercial shipping, cruise ships. It's just there's a lot happening there.
absolutely. Yeah, a lot. I'm surprised they come, and it's interesting. I think it was 3 years ago where it was doing during canoe races down in the inlet that orcas came. And so we're
Oh,
like
cool.
so many times. There's been so many times where they come around those times where there's canoe races or canoe journeys happening.
That's
So that's
awesome.
exciting.
I would definitely agree also with like when you're talking about like the parallels between the like your culture and killer whale culture. I think Western science is very behind, and like
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of things that you guys have known all along, and like Western science is just barely now trying to figure it out. Like the paper about the cultural importance of grandmothers and like moms defending their sons, like that's all within the last few years. But like when you look at the stories of people that live along these waterways that have lived in harmony with, the sea and lived with killer whales for, centuries and even further back than that, it's like, well, yeah, that's like in all of the stories. Like, where have
Exactly.
you been?
Exactly. Exactly. It's interesting having a lot of even with so many things like ethnobotany is huge. It's like, the
Yeah.
study of how indigenous people um interact and like use plant medicine around them. And
Hmm.
then a lot of that they look at the use and then they isolate like the chemical and then they mass produce it into pharmaceuticals. I think it's something
Yeah.
like over a third of pharmaceuticals come from indigenous knowledge. It's just not
Yeah.
credited, obviously,
Yeah.
or paid, but like it's wild. And even like you hear of things like earth, like what's earthing, like just being in nature and
Oh, like
like
forest bathing or like grounding yourself and stuff.
yeah, and I'm like, well, yeah. It's like there's studies coming out about how it's really good for you. And I'm like, well, yeah, yeah,
Like it's kind of our whole deal, man.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. It's not yeah.
so with there's like a parallel in a story where there was at one point the people living in the Coast Salish territories were like not finding enough food, and then like killer whales help them just like sustain themselves and survive. Is that something
Yes.
that's like a story from your people?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
I could
cool.
definitely talk about that story. It's a good one. So well, it's a sad one, but the orcas did help. So many, not to Queen and Crane, many years ago, where the Tulalip tribes are now located, there was a famine happening, and our people, like half of our diet was salmon. We relied heavily on salmon, and there was this a famine happening because the seals were eating. There was just an overpopulation of seals,
Mm-hmm.
and they were eating all the salmon, and the people were starving. And so they prayed and prayed for something to save them. And two brothers, they seen the plight of their people, and they prayed to Creator and said, please let us help us find a way to save them. Help us find a way to save us all. And suddenly, as they're out on the water, looking out on the water and praying, they started growing giant fins and increasing in size, and they jumped in the water, and the two brothers turned into orca whales. And
Mm.
they, as they do, they controlled the population of the seals, and the salmon returned to the people, and the people were saved. And so I really like that story, and that's why Tulalip owes so much, and that's why they say orcas are our relatives. That's they're the descendants of the two brothers that went into the ocean to save the people, and that's why we, for many years, have honored them and would give them things like whale tongues and give them, blessings, and in turn they would control the seal population, and the salmon would like flourish. It was a very beautiful reciprocal relationship that they had. And it was awesome because when we were out getting footage and getting photos of orcas, it was two brothers that passed by us.
Oh,
And so I was like,
cool.
no way. And that
Yeah.
was really exciting. I was like, just like in the story. So I thought that was really cool. And there were teenage brothers too, as well, like in the story. And but that
Cool.
was really sweet. They were sleeping and they look out for each other. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
awesome. And they're
Yeah.
transients as well, like
Mm-hmm.
again in the story, because obviously southern residents don't eat seals. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so that also is a question I have. So has there always been traditional knowledge that there are different types of killer whales? Like there's been like it's been distinguished for a long time that there's like the residents and the transients and like stories reflect that.
yeah, mainly because like we'd be around them, and the population was obviously much, much higher, of
Mm-hmm.
100 plus, not even that long ago, to be honest, but for a long time, there was a large population of orca whales. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's stories of looking across like a narrow bay and just hundreds and hundreds of them breaching. And that was
Mm-hmm.
like a common occurrence. And they literally just, I get so excited. That just blows my mind. It's so sad that they're endangered, now, the southern residents, but like at one point, just like I can't even fathom that. Just hundreds across a bay, just
Mm-hmm.
like breaching and gathering, and who knows, singing, dancing,
Yeah. I
um,
mean they're definitely a
riveting.
much more social type of killer whale than the transients. And so their gatherings always just seem so much more joyous. Like is
Yes.
there so much more surface activity?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, my people and many people's like I want to look up more specific stories, but it was like known that they're different because of like the food. Obviously, we see
Mm-hmm.
those ones eat that and those ones eat that. And I believe that would be the main thing. And again, I think my mom's people, the Tulalip people, had more of a relationship with the transients because of the seal
Mm-hmm.
controlling the
Yeah.
population and also giving them whale tongues.
Uh-huh.
So their connection was a bit more with them, but I know a lot of other people's had an awareness of the southern residents, and like also like a mutual like respect. And again, I don't have any specific stories yet of why and how our family structures are so similar, like within the matriarchy of the grandmothers teaching the grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking into that in this
Yeah.
like next leg of I'll be doing interviews next week actually of like elders and knowledge keepers and storytellers. So maybe I'll have to get back to you, but I'm so
Yeah.
curious. That's the one thing I'm like very curious about is how, if there's anything of how that came to be, of how that mirroring, like, but anyways, it's
Could just be
I,
that,
I don't think mirror.
your Coast Salish people are smart, killer whales are smart. They put the women in charge. Like they both
Yes,
came to the same conclusion.
yes. Long live the matriarchy. Absolutely, absolutely. And we've known that it creates for pretty peaceful and pretty like when you acknowledge the feminine, it's very like and give power to the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
It's it makes for very, I feel like, comfortable and emotionally safe environments
Yeah,
and
totally.
collaborative. I believe that. And so I totally agree. Yeah. It's led us in a very good way where we certain cultural values are really held really high, because I feel like with certain times with like kind of colonial modern like feminism, it's sometimes I think it's changing now, but for a while it was like very like girl boss
Yeah.
millionaire, you know what I mean? Very
Yeah.
like trying to, just basically women trying to embody the masculine as much as possible. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's not it. That's not it. And
Yeah.
you don't want to become like your oppressor. Like it's not.
Yeah.
And so with matriarchy, a lot of those values of like listening, humility, gentleness, caring, that could be considered feminine are just valued from like all members of like the community. So
Yeah.
yeah, matriarchy, it's powerful. I'm
Yeah.
excited to get into that.
I think more of the like community work that's meaningful and has more potency is like what happens at the sewing circle. Like when you've got your
Mm.
grandma and your aunties and like your neighbor and whoever having a quiet, safe conversation, that's when people really are willing to figure out where they stand on something. It's not becoming the entrepreneur who can hang with the boys and all that. It's like it's actually bringing your community together. And often it's doing something you already do, cooking, crafts. Like it's a quiet conversation in your house. It's not like running around being flashy with your watches and your clothes and stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
it's
the
like there's
revolution happens at the sewing circle.
yeah. I love that. Yeah. At the for us it'd be weaving circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it starts. Absolutely. That's where the healing starts, and you heal yourself to heal the world. So I
Yeah.
totally agree.
So as we look at like now, Western science is trying to catch up with what indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest have known for a long time. There's this new push to separate killer whales as actual species instead of just saying they're, ecotypes or they're cultural types. They're trying to actually justify like naming them as new species so that they can manage them better. I don't know, that was driven by US scientists from NOAA, but I don't know, is the same conversation happening in Canada?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just was published like let me look at the date. There it was just like in the US news in March and the paper came out in let me pull it up here. Also in March. And so I don't know, maybe that's going to be a new conversation that comes fully through the Pacific Northwest. So, because US and Canada, we have to work together on things.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting strategy to try and have a better and like clearer conservation plan.
Mhm.
Because I don't think you can manage the ecotypes as one species, like legally the way the world works right now between the two countries and all the states involved and all the watersheds involved. It's like if you're talking about just killer whales, some people are willing to be like, oh, well, some of them are fine. So like we don't need to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I could see that working definitely as a strategy. And again, with even some of the smaller restrictions and like differences between the southern residents and transients, I think there needs to be even more because of how much more like the southern residents are at risk. And again, like that could even come from a misunderstanding of people not even really knowing the difference or
Yeah,
understanding. Like, yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I would very easily believe that most of the lawmakers involved when it comes to like actually signing whatever regulations go into place don't really understand the difference. So maybe this will help make it clearer because I know a lot of the people on the ground that are involved with whatever part of the movement they're in, whether that's state fish and wildlife, whether that's just their local area, like most of those people understand like what's happening, but that all needs to get communicated to someone way outside of the situation.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. I definitely think there needs to be more knowledge because even it's interesting, like I brought it up to somebody, the southern residents being, obviously being a lot more endangered than transients. And they're like, why don't they just breed together? And I'm like, no, there's a lot of cultural complexities that are
yeah.
involved. Like they're not just they are obviously animals, but they're highly social. They don't speak the
Hmm.
same language. Like
Yeah.
it's they're and even biologically, like they don't eat the same thing. They're different
Right.
physiologically. And so I was like, there's just needs to be more information out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it was cool to be able to give like a better this paper. I think they did a pretty good job of communicating with a few um news outlets about like really what's the difference. Like,
Mhm,
they haven't interbred for over 300,000 years. Like Southern
mhm.
residents have been their own category for at least 100,000 years. Like this is a long time. Like this is before, humans were in this area. And so like they've had something figured out for a while without us. Like, who are we to come in and change it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly like I don't know. That's again more information like that needs to be out there for sure. And again,
Yeah.
hopefully with my film too, that's something I felt like is very important to
Hmm.
highlight is the differences.
Totally. And you were just in New Zealand, so I don't know how much you like talked about like whales and like how they view whales and their culture if you interacted with anybody down there. But New Zealand, Tahiti, and the Cook Islands, all their indigenous leaders just signed a treaty that recognizes whales as legal people.
Mm.
Um, so they can like be defended in court, basically.
Oh, incredible. Oh, that's
Yeah.
incredible. So yeah, I actually for my film we don't really go deep into like
Yeah.
whale protection or anything, but what we have been wanting to highlight is in like research and just push forward is like giving bodies of water legal personhood
Hmm.
and the rights of nature. That was a goal of ours, is to give the inlet the rights of nature because we see it as like a relative in person. And I know a lot of what they do in New Zealand too, they're able to give a body of water the rights of nature. So that doesn't like that doesn't surprise me. And I remember hearing about that too. Um, and it makes so much sense to give these really complex social animals that have so many similarities to us to give them rights. And it shouldn't just, animals shouldn't just be given rights based on like their intelligence, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
But still, like there's definitely a need for that. I feel like we could follow suit. I think that would be a really great goal we can aim
Yeah.
for here.
So if you want to give the inlet like the law of nature, how exactly does that work? Like does it become like a signed like recognition or something or
Yeah, so for my people, we already do, and it's
yeah.
almost like part of us is like it's unlikely well, it's not, I mean, it is unlikely, but it'll be very difficult for to get the Canadian government to agree to and recognize the inlet and give it legal personhood, but it's different everywhere how a
Hmm.
lot of people have like managed that thereafter, but um basically when it has those rights, it has the rights to like we kind of come up with and using our own law decide what that looks like going forward. And for us it'd be like she has the right to a healthy environment, like would be a big one. She's the right to like that would be actually, yeah, to be clean, and has the right to like safety and things like that. And yeah, and I think for us that includes all of the animals that live in the inlet as well.
Hmm.
And yeah.
Interesting. I think it would be, I mean, it certainly would be an interesting conversation to at least like bring up and provide for people to consider. Like,
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, I mean, your regular voters in the area maybe don't even have that on their radar as like an option of like
Yeah,
something they could
it's very
do.
hard to conceptualize too. And that's another reason why like I made my film, is to show. And even my grandma, my actual grandma, played like the inlet and everything in my film. So like it's hard to conceptualize like having something that people consider like inanimate to be like alive and deserving of rights. So
Yeah, well, and I also wonder the longer I work on and around the ocean and like bring people to the ocean, like on ships and whale watching trips and stuff, the more sure I am that the ocean's like a living, breathing thing. But
mhm,
the less confident I am that people spend enough time in nature to also
mhm,
come to that conclusion.
mhm.
Yeah, I just don't know how to like express that to people that like this is not just water with salt in it. Like,
Exactly. You have to feel it. Exactly.
yeah.
It's something like so inexplainable having that relationship. Like you could describe as much as you want what it feels like to be out on the water
Hmm.
and be out around orcas, but it never does it justice, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Yeah, I totally agree. It's something that's total definitely has to be felt.
Yeah. And I don't know how you like, I mean, I'm on the ship, I'm with them for like several weeks. So it's you have more time to kind of lay the groundwork and hopefully get people to like start to see it. But I don't
Mhm.
know, even just for me looking at how the weather changes on the ocean, you go, "Oh yeah, this thing is alive." Like
Yeah,
so I don't yeah, it's just something I'm like battling with myself as like a naturalist and a guide is like how do you get people to this realization that there's so much more going on?
right, right. Oh my gosh.
So
Um,
things like filmmaking and photography and like talking story, like I think those are all important things. Um, and like trying to bring that more into like what I do on the ship is definitely something I'm trying to work on is like create it more as a story, less of a lecture, you know?
mhm.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I agree with filmmaking. It hits people differently.
hmm.
With seeing these things in this way, and like I feel like a lot art has the ability to open people's hearts up
Yeah,
and make them more open to seeing different truths and different perspectives.
definitely. So, what like how I don't really know too much about like the filmmaking process. Like when you have a film on the circuit, can how do people get the ability to watch it? Like do they have to attend the festivals or like is it going to come out for the public to see it at some point or like I guess I don't really know how it works.
Yeah, so it's currently with the when it's in the film festival circuit, you can't distribute it. Like it could only
Mhm.
be shown at like film festivals. So that's where we're at right now. So I wish there
Mhm.
could be a way where I could just be like, here, everybody watch it. But that's as of right now only at film festivals. The next film festival will be it is in Mexico. I'll be going in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And in Yalapa, it's a village near Puerto Vallarta. And then after
Okay.
that on June 15th, it'll be playing in Portland at Portland Eco Film Festival.
Oh, cool.
And that's where we won an award for Visionary Filmmaker Award. And so I'll be going down there and it'll be showing. And I could also include a link to if anybody's like in the
Yeah,
Portland area to check it out. But
totally.
after that, it will be I'm not sure if I can say, but we're reaching like licensing agreements where it's going to be
Oh,
played
cool.
with the provider for like a year. And then after that, I'm hoping to just have it out there. So
Nice.
as of
Oh,
right now, I can't I can't send it around or be like, oh, watch this. Not yet, anyways.
well, that's cool. I mean, if people are around and can attend the festival or something, then we can definitely send it their way. So that would be great. And
Absolutely.
then your project with Nat Geo, is that going to be like televised? Is it like a series they're going to promote online, or have they not figured that out yet?
We will see. We will see.
Ooh, cool.
It's
All
going to
right.
start off in classrooms and be like an educational
Hmm.
series. And then after that, it's TBD, but very exciting. Yeah.
Cool. What's your like target age group for the classroom
High school.
high school? Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So it'll be a pretty approachable film for anybody to be able to watch if it goes out to the
Yes.
wider public audience.
Definitely.
So
That's the goal for sure.
very cool. Oh, it's so exciting. You have so many cool things going on.
Thank you. Thank you.
If people want to get more involved, like specifically to support what's going on in your inlet, but also just wider, like people are inspired and want to do more for their local waterways, is there any like advice or resources that you would like to point people at?
Absolutely. As we were just saying, I've sort of changed my approach, like with a lot of when people would ask me this, like, what's your advice to younger people? And I'm like, yeah, stand up and fight. But now it's changed to just like be in nature, like we're
Hmm.
saying, to get a better understanding of something, you have to be around it and encourage others to be around it. And I feel like because of where we live is so beautiful, it's not too difficult. And there's a quote from my great grandpa that I like, and my great grandpa Chieftain George, as it goes, is get to know the animals and nature around you, because if you don't get to know it, you won't understand it. and what you don't understand, you fear, and what you fear, you destroy.
Mm-hmm.
So get to know and understand them. And that's what I say to everybody. Just be around it. And of course, like, I think it's also, no, I believe, I know it's very important to understand the history of the land and the history of the culture and the history of the people that have lived in the areas that, especially if you're was listening, based in Canada or US or anywhere that's colonized, to
Mm-hmm.
understand the stories and the deep like richness and the reciprocal relationships and who stewarded and cared for the land since time immemorial. That's also very important. And I feel like that's also a part of getting to know nature, is getting to know the history and the stories and the creation stories. I feel like when people start to know the creation story out here, they start to see the water differently
Mm-hmm.
and to see the connection that my people have. It's such a beautiful thing, to know these little histories. And so I encourage both of those things. And yeah, and also of course, if you want to help waterways, get involved in local orgs. There's so many out there.
Yeah.
And if not, sometimes you just gotta create one or
Yeah.
create
If it
a
doesn't
movement.
exist, sometimes it's up for you to make it happen. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being on. I'm so excited for what's going to come next for you, and we'll definitely stay following along with what you're up to next. So,
Thank you. Thanks for
yeah,
having me.
of course. And thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.